everyone, welcome to the debate. I'm your host Maqbool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at two important stories. The first is with reference to the fight against terrorism in Pakistan, and this is of course something that Pakistan has been dealing with for quite some time now, and we've seen previously as well that there have been many efforts that the government and the state of the country has made in this regard, particularly in terms of banning militant groups and organizations. But it seems that the number keeps on increasing. While we talk about the list that have been banned, it has gone about to more than 80, but we've also seen at the same time that terrorist attacks have also risen, and there is also of course the threat that is coming in from safe havens in Afghanistan. So we're going to be taking a look at what this means when we deal with terrorism in Pakistan today, in light of what we have done previously, what our victories have been, and what we have learned along the way, and how exactly do we reflect back on the kind of actions that the government and the state can possibly take in order to make sure that we effectively reach the situation where we can fight terrorism and bring it to its ultimate end. So we're going to be taking a look at what exactly will be the way forward, especially when we talk about the terrorist organizations within Pakistan, and of course the Azm-e-Istiqam that the Prime Minister has announced, and what kind of coordinated effort is required to making sure that the actions are not limited to just banning these organizations, but also in terms of serious consequences for them. There is also of course the issues of weapons and financing, which is something that is still going on and has to be curtailed, and then of course cross-border movement with also safe havens in Afghanistan. This is something that in a recent UNSC report has also been recognized internationally and has been taken cognizance of by the US, who has also said that it is part of the strategy to making sure that Afghanistan is not being used for any cases of international terrorism, something that Pakistan of course has reiterated on many fronts, and it has experienced more than 800 terrorist attacks alone within a period of a year, and we've seen that this is something that is extremely important to Pakistan's safety and security, and must also be considered when we talk about international security emanating from Afghanistan. The US says it has a whole of government approach when it comes to Afghanistan, and making sure that there is no action being taken outside from that country, but unfortunately we've seen that there is evidence of that, and so we're going to see what sort of collaboration or possibilities exist when the US says that it's very closely speaking to its partners and allies and taking this approach towards Afghanistan. This will be our focus in the first segment of the show today. Our next one is going to be taking a look at, of course, the recent assassination of Ismail Hania, something, of course, that Pakistan has condemned in a unanimous resolution passed by the National Assembly today as well. And, of course, we've also observed a day of mourning. There has been funeral prayers in absentia for Ismail Hania in Pakistan after Friday prayers today. At the same time, of course, we've seen that the funeral was held in Qatar, where he will be laid to rest. So we're going to be taking a look at exactly what is going to be the impact of this particular action, especially when we talk about the possibility of an all-out war, an escalation that goes beyond Gaza. And this is, of course, something that Pakistan has reiterated again in the resolution as well, saying that it is just a conspiracy to sabotage what is going on in Gaza and take the attention away from that genocide. So we're going to be taking a look at that in closer detail in our second segment of the show today. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi and Raja Faisal, and we've also been joined online by Dr. Jamil Khan, who's a former ambassador, and we will also be joined later on by Brigadier Raashid Wali, Janjua, who's Director Research IPRI, and he's joined us. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being part of the discussion and joining us in the debate today. And we're going to start with you when we talk about, Farrukh, when we talk about the considerations of course, how exactly we're going to be taking a look at the issues of terrorism and the coordinated approach that we've spoken about. And this is something that we have, of course, looked back at in terms of the National Action Plan as well, in terms of what lies ahead as part of Azm-e-Istiqam, but especially given the dynamics of the current situation in terms of the increase in terrorist activities, the increase in banned terrorist organizations, and of course the threat emanating from Afghanistan. What factors are very important for Pakistan to remember?
Right, Sana, thank you very much for the opportunity. I think that the most important thing at this moment, whenever you're going to prescribe various organizations, we have added two more to the list now, and we have renamed, renamed TTP as well as Fitna Khawarij. So with that kind of change, what actually matters is the state's ability to enforce its writ and to ensure that the state has a total monopoly over the use of violence. That hasn't been the case in the past. We have repeatedly seen that any effort by the armed forces is undercut by various elements in the country. There are conspiracy theorists, Taliban apologists among our media pundits, and they keep on actually peddling all kind of disinformation. Mind you, I'm not saying misinformation, disinformation, right? Information, misinformation that is weaponized against the state, that is what has been happening. So in the coming days also, prescribing an organization is not enough. What you need is some kind of consensus and identifying of the people who might be sympathizers of organizations like TTP, and they then can be sorted out. There has to be some kind of framework to ensure that these voices don't get the kind of leeway that they get. And the day before yesterday, we mentioned one of such voices that has been actually even weaponizing not TTP, TLP's grievances against the CJP as well, or Maqbool Jan I mentioned, right? These are the people who have been there, and they have repeatedly confused the nation about what things are to be done in coming days. So first of all, the things that the state needs to do, we keep on restructuring the country's frameworks to regulate media, social media and all, but these voices are never really looked into. Till the time you don't actually sort them out, you won't be able to ensure that the people of Pakistan are getting the right kind of message. That done, now what is next? The most important thing then, Sana, is to guard the borders and to ensure that the entire country, entire nation is behind its soldiers when the borders are guarded, especially when it comes to Afghan border, because from there we keep on seeing perpetual infiltration of elements that are anti-Pakistan. So for that, the first thing that comes to mind, and we have been actually at it for quite some time and we have been discussing it, is the hardening of the border, fencing of the border. Somehow that number seems to be stuck between 96 and 98%, and we haven't been able to go to 100%. Because of that, there are elements, and even supported by the Afghan Taliban also, who actually come and undermine such efforts. We have seen that our soldiers have been shot at by not only the non-state actors, but by the so-called state actors from Afghanistan as well when they go for the fencing of the border. So these things, once you have taken care of these two elements, then you can actually squeeze hard on these elements and you can ensure that they are stamped out and there is no residual sympathy for such elements in the society and the state that might eventually, like it happened a few years ago when we had actually taken care of Taliban problem inside the country. Then all of a sudden, when Afghan Taliban came to power, after that there was a government and there were elements that started conceding a lot of space to them and things went haywire.
Right. Ambassador Saab, I'd come to you now with reference to, of course, especially when we talk about the threats coming in from Afghanistan. It's important, of course, to see how exactly we'll be able to then make sure that the border is safe. And then, of course, the fact that the reassurances that were earlier given by the Afghan Taliban regime are actually met. And now that the US is also taking cognizance of this issue, what exactly is the possibility of this collaboration? And I'd like your take on that, especially when we talk about the fact that Pakistan has called time and again to the Afghan Taliban regime to making sure that these safe havens don't exist and that the terrorist groups do not act out of their territory. But of course, it has continued to happen. So what can possibly be the way forward in this regard and the role that US can play in this?
Well, the US can only give the technology to our people who are fighting against the terrorism. And US could do the capacity building, but we have already so much of capacity already built. Hands-on experience we already have, and we have already been recognized by so many agencies of the world that our law enforcement agencies, army, they were able to control before it started re-emerging. And in fact, I will just draw the attention of our viewer on the very first National Action Plan of 20 points. And during that National Action Plan, in fact, that was uh, evolved and that was agreed by all the stakeholders, political as well as other stakeholders. And from that standpoint, it had the ownership. So it was very much enunciated in those 20 points as to how the body should be managed, how the capacity should be built, how the technology assistance could be taken from other um, uh, uh, entities. So U.S. can only do as much, and U.S. can also assert pressure on the Taliban regime, and they have the mechanism, they have the financial system with them, they have the diplomatic pressure on the Taliban because the Doha Agreement, whatever was agreed between Taliban and the United States, that has not been complied by Taliban, and that's why U.S. had to go and take the matter to the Security Council, and Security Council, more than 3 resolutions, have emphasized referring to the Doha Agreement and asking for the compliance of that. And what was it? What is the same thing what we are talking here? That is the Afghan territory being used by the terrorist organization. And it's not one, it's not two, there are about 16 terrorist organizations or even more, 20. And that has been reflected into the report of United Nations Monitoring Team, and that has been submitted to the Security Council. So it's not only one report. About the last report, which just about 2-3 days ago, it very clearly dilates upon the activities of PTP, activities of other terrorist groups, and it also draws the attention of
what the report actually states is something that Pakistan has been saying all this while, and this is something that we have actually also been a victim of, which also the report reiterates. And so I want your take on the value that there exists in what Pakistan is saying and the way that its partners and allies, which the US claims it is going to be in terms of the collaboration against terrorism.
That's it. Terrorism is a global phenomenon now. And again, a report crossed my eyes in which they say that ISIS, that is a Daesh, they have started now, their presence has been seen during the Olympics. Their presence has been seen in Germany. Presence has been seen in Europe. So the world community has started worrying about it. And they again refer back to the United Nations Resolution 1267 and then 1373 and about 2-3 more United Nations resolution to again draw their to enforce in its letter and spirit, that is the financial squeeze on these organizations, border management, kinetic action, non-kinetic action. So all those things are once again reiterated by that, choking of the terror financing. So they are again re-emphasizing on those points. So Pakistan's standpoint, and Pakistan, whatever Pakistan has been asking the world community to start pressure. But there's one more point, because we have our own peculiar circumstances. The Afghan Taliban, we definitely had a very good rapport with them. And in fact, we supported them all along, even by taking blame from the Western countries, and I don't know, there's some kind of an element of handling issue, which our political leadership could not handle it at that level, where the Taliban is now really not collaborating and cooperating with our foreign office as much as they should have been. So that we have to really identify that. We have, again, every country has its own peculiar and specific circumstances. Ours is unique because we have a tribal, element in it. We have a religious element in it. We have a jihadi element in it. We have a terrorist element in it. We have extremist element in it. So, and both sides of the border, it was really quite polluted with the terrorists, with these feelings, with these ingredients. But now they have shifted to the other territory.
Right, these are important aspects, and Jamil Sahab, I'll come back to you about this. Stay with us in the debate, and I'm going to come back to you and explore this further because that's an important issue. I'd also like to take Janjua Sahab's perspective in this as well. Welcome to the debate, Janjua Sahab. This is an important discussion, of course, when we talk about the fight against terrorism. But I want your perspective also when we talk about what is coming in from Afghanistan and what safe havens exist and what sort of international collaboration can exist. At the same time, there's of course a lot that can be done within the borders of the country as well, and to protect our own people and our own borders, and to making sure that whatever goes on inside the country is something that we can actually take care of. And we've done that previously as well. So in terms of where we stand today with a long list of prescribed organizations, what exactly can possibly be done about these terrorist organizations within the country, particularly also the political and religious domains and those elements that may not necessarily be part of the traditional terrorist or militant groups, but of course damage the interest of the country in pretty much the same way?
The answer is very simple. Just implement the National Action Plan and proscribe all of these extremist organizations. Wrest back the control of madrasas and mosques, and modify a criminal justice system, and give the exemplary punishments to those who perpetrate the acts of extremism, so that there is a clear message driven home that extremism will not be countenanced by the state. We have a 20-point NAP, which is still hanging fire. A lot of its provisions have not been implemented as yet. So extremism is a multidimensional problem. You have to tackle at the societal level. There are initiatives like Paigam-e-Pakistan, Council of Islamic Ideology has given the guidelines. There has been a fatwa also based on the consensus of a number of ulama. And there are clear guidelines in national internal security policy as well about extremism. And the problem lies in the implementation. Nobody is serious in taking back the control of madrasas from the extremist elements. There is a need to bring all the madrasas in registration and force them to disclose their sources of finance, plus their sources of foreign, plus their inmates who are from the foreign countries, so that there is absolute transparency. And then there is got to be a check on what they teach there and how they indoctrinate their students. So that's about internal, and a very strong oversight by the state police, intelligence agencies is required, so that any extremist activity, any terrorist cell, or any funding is preempted in a very timely manner, and the evil should be nipped in the bud. So those are the things you can do internally.
Right. Brigadier Sahab, when you, just to clarify one point, when you actually spoke about national internal security policy, I was wondering which document were you referring to? Because there was, 3 years ago, there was a national policy of this sort, but that was not internal policy. There used to be another policy that was presented by PMLN's government, and it was focused on internal. I just wanted to clarify which one are you referring to, because the first one seemed to be very, a difficult kind of a set of projects, and I don't think that were ever implemented.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There have been policies galore, starting with the national intelligence security policy. Then the same things were reiterated in the national security policy also. Then NACTA guidelines, NAP guidelines are full of those. 20-point national action plan is right in front of us, but we honor them in breach only. Unfortunately, that's a reality. Our politicians are not serious. the extremism is a pervasive phenomena, and the whole society is in the grip of extremism and the wrong interpretation of religion. Unless somebody takes up the courage to take the bull by the horns and challenge those stereotypes and take back the control of mosque, because in countries like Turkey, Malaysia, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, GCC countries, mosques are not allowed to be taken over by elements who have their own extremist ideology, and nobody can even read the public Juma sermons without the government permission and vetting. So that's the kind of control that is necessary if we have the real desire and will to control this extremism. Then there is an external factor. We know our merged areas in KPK are destabilized. There's a Afghan interim government which is a role model for such elements, and they would like to emulate the same model here. So we need to take better control of our borders. Out of the 13 which are authorized crossing points, 4 are just open. But we know how porous the border is, and because of the corrupt practices, the smuggling is going on. The cross-border movement has not stopped like it in the manner it should be stopped. So these are the things that we need to be serious about. We have an example of Iran. Iran has a destabilized border with Afghanistan. It has a restive border with Iraq. It is a difficult border with Syria. But despite that, they are controlling the borders, and there is no issue like we have here. So we will start with the repatriation of the refugees. We need to be serious as a nation to repatriate them ultimately back, because we have deported a number of Afghans. Certain Afghans are still here. 1.3 million are POR holders. Then 0.8 million are Afghan citizenship card holders. We have to now decide as a nation that what is that time limit. Okay, if you wish to be lenient and you wish to help them, give them a deadline, 1 year, 2 years. But after that, they have to go back, so that the problems that we have of proxies, illegal activities, crime and its nexus with terrorism can be sorted out internally. So it's a whole raft of measures to be taken holistically. The clarity and consistency in policies by the political leadership is the foremost requirement.
Right.
And capacity building of the law enforcement is the next. So it's not a rocket science.
Absolutely. And these are absolutely important aspects that you have highlighted, Janjua Sahab, and they're not rocket science, but unfortunately we've seen that it is still something that we want to see implemented in full spirit. And Faisal, I want your take on that, because especially when we talk about what Janjua Sahab was referring to in terms of control over the religious narratives, and to making sure that we actually have that dissemination of what religion is all about, what jihad is all about, because it seems that a lot of this is still stemming in from those misconceptions, and we haven't really been able to penetrate as much as perhaps other organizations have that spread terrorism and hatred. And so I want your take on that, and what the role of the religious elite in the country, the scholars in the country, can actually do in this regard. And then add to that also specifically when we talk about the political elements, because again, the implementation has to come from there.
Yes, Sana, obviously it's a very good question and a very important one. Of course, when we talk about fighting against the terror, the home ground sympathizers, or the ones who are always highlight that this is not terrorism, rather it is some kind of jihad or whatever, they need to be of course countered. And when it comes to religious leadership, in shape of political leadership or non-political leadership, religious leadership, they need to be of course taken on board, and fresh sort of efforts they are needed here, because we are facing a threat that is very refreshing for our enemy. So what is possible is that all of the religious leadership, they can be taken on board once more, and there are serious red lines that can be drawn, And as Janjua Saab earlier mentioned, rightly pointed out that of course the religious sermons and even the Jummah prayers, the khutbahs, they are used for their own agendas. That needs to be, of course, shunned. This kind of practice should not be allowed anymore. And we have seen that our mosques, the speakers of our mosques, they are constantly being used by religious leaders on ground, and they are promoting their own agenda, whoever it is against. And of course this actually fuels the sectarianism, fuels the terrorism, and fuels within the society. There is a sort of an element of extremism that is getting promoted. But when it comes to the political parties can play a pivotal role, because majority of the all of the political parties, they have some kind of religious presence within themselves, be it People's Party, PMLN, PTI, all of the major political parties, they have a large number of religious sentiments within them. They need to come up with their own manifestos in which they have to clearly tell that this menace needs to be countered, and unless we have sorted everything internally regarding internal peace, regarding internal security, I doubt it that there would be a sort of impact across the border. When I say across the border, of course, the enemy is across the border, and it is being facilitated out there. Regarding that, of course, I have always suggested 4 steps that needs to be taken urgently by the security forces and the state of Pakistan. And regarding that, of course, number 1 is internal sympathizers. As I've earlier said, they need to be countered, and a religious framework needs to be drawn once more, and red lines needs to be drawn. And that is something that is important for the internal one. Internally, when we are stronger, then it would be better for us to go across the border and do our activities. Number 2nd one is the facilitators, and majority of the facilitators are, of course, on the bordering area, be it Pakistan side or be it the Afghan side. And even if it is Pakistan side, then that Pakistan side, of course, we have largely seen in recent times that the Afghan nationals, Afghan migrants who are, of course, in Pakistan, they are the majority of the facilitators are, they are the ones. So they need to be looked into and countered through the intelligence based operations and all. And number 3, financiers. When it comes to financiers, of course, we know that our eastern border, India, is one of the financiers of all of these activities, because they want us to fully engage on the western border, so that we can our sort of focus on the eastern border with India can decrease. And this they have been doing since long, and now, of course, they are investing in terrorism on our western border, and we need to look into that. And of course, when it comes to countries like UAE, countries like neighboring countries of Afghanistan, of course Iran, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, all of these countries, they are being used by India for facilitations, for financings of all of these terrorist outfits. And be it ETIM, be it IMU, be it TTP or BLA, BLF, all of these, they are getting, of course, finances from finances from India itself. Intelligence sharing is key in terms of finding out who the financiers are, and then financiers, of course, they need to be taken to task. And last, as earlier, of course, one of our guests, I forgot whether it was Ambassador Jamil or Brigadier Janjua, they have mentioned a very important point, and that is that the only promises from US or the Western countries won't be enough. we need to have assistance in terms of technology. There is a very up-to-date technology which is being used in terms of intelligence, in terms of pinpoint sort of onslaught on the enemy. I think we need to go for that. We need to seek that from our allies who think that the menace which we are fighting is eventually a menace for them as well. We are simply controlling it here, and if it is if it is countered here, then they will be eventually safe as well.
Right.
So only the slogans from our allies, the Western allies, it won't be enough.
Sure.
We have to have the tech transfer from them in terms of enhancing our intelligence capabilities. And with all of these countries, Western countries, be it the Middle Eastern countries or the countries around Afghanistan, we have to have a mechanism of intelligence sharing in terms of nibbing all of these financiers and facilitators. This is the only way, and all of these aspects, they need to go parallel, and it shouldn't be like one aspect we can forget about it and the others we keep on
Right,
doing.
absolutely, and we'll talk about this in further detail, but Farrukh, you wanted to add something on controlling the religious narrative and making sure that we have the right messages across, particularly in terms of jihad.
Right, Sarah. I don't want to actually stand between this long prelude and then your guests who are there waiting for their turn. I just wanted to actually point out a couple of things regarding the importance of how we keep on missing a beat, right? First of all, you have to understand the problem of interpreting Islam. And that has been because in Islam there are 3 or 4 very important pillars, that one of them was shut 1,000 years ago. Of course, divine guidance, Quran, and then the Prophet's example. After that, what comes is ijtihad, ijma or qiyas, right? But what happened was that there used to be a formal institution of that, but then somewhere around 1,000 years ago, so our religious or political leaders decided that you are not going to have any other person more than four imams, or if you are being generous, then 5 imams. After that, you are not going to have interpretation. What it created, it froze us in the time. Why? At that time, there was no concept of nation state. There was no concept of modern technology. So what we end up doing even now, any religious movement that is there will always go for pan-Islamism, which is a difficulty for an Islamic state, because in the end, it ends up undermining its own goals. So what I wanted to highlight is missed opportunities. This war started 24 years ago, a war on terror, right? Had we, or 22 years ago, had we been paying attention, you could have invested in enough the growth of clergy with informed base on Pakistan, that today you would have had many ulama who would have been helping the state in interpreting religion in accordance with the wishes, rational wishes of the state of Pakistan. But what we did, what we have done is exactly what we have done with political parties. Instead of grooming new politicians, what we do is we keep on actually dividing and using one politician or then the other. So what happens? In the end, all those politicians gang up and start using their own influence on the state of Pakistan. Similarly, the same goes for the clerics. So even today, it is not too late. The state of Pakistan should at least start some pilot projects where you actually, in 20 years, Sana, a new generation is actually raised and it becomes totally capable of deciding what is right and what is wrong. Why is it that we missed that opportunity? That is the question.
Right, absolutely. And Dr. Jamil, I would like to build on that, because I want to understand your take also in terms of dealing with the emergence of new terrorist groups with new names, or perhaps the same elements coming up in different forms again and again, talking about these religious narratives and springing up from this perspective, and the take that can possibly be taken up forward when we talk about the religious community, and not just in Pakistan, but also in the region, perhaps from the OIC. Is there something that can possibly target the essence on which, unfortunately, these terrorist organizations continue to work? Ambassador Saab, are you with us? Right. Janjua Saab, I'd like your take on this. If you can add to that, whether or not there can possibly be a more consolidated way that particularly Islamic countries look at this threat.
Could you repeat your question? I believe your question is about the terrorist groups and extremist entities proliferating in Pakistan. Is that the question?
Yes, and beyond, and especially in terms of the essence that links back to Islamic elements or misinterpretation of Islam. Why is it that there isn't a more regional, perhaps, approach in terms of countering that perspective, especially when we talk about not just the scholars within the Pakistan, but also as part of the Islamic community in general?
The reason is very simple, because in our region, there is no other Islamic country other than Bangladesh and Afghanistan, and both are beset with their own problems. Afghanistan, you know, they have a theocratical regime now. So that theocratic regime believes in a peculiar ideology, and they believe that that ideology should be imposed on the rest of the region. So there cannot be any consensus on that score. Pakistan is a Muslim country, Islamic country, which follows pluralistic ethos, a moderate version of Islam, but we have elements within us who are pandering to an extremist thought that because of our influence from the GCC countries, and especially our old linkages, which are post 1979, an element of sectarianism has crept in. The whole chain of madrasas that was created for strategic purposes to fight the Soviet war, and then the war against American occupation in Afghanistan. So that's a whole network which was indoctrinated initially during the Soviet occupation to conduct a religious war, and a whole ecosystem of jihad was created. So when that occupation was over, that ecosystem could not be dismantled very effectively, because the state did not do a very good job of rehabilitating those elements which were indoctrinated, and they were given a kind of a mindset to indulge in militaristic activities. So after that, there has been order and disorder, cycles of chaos. Internally also, we are not very effective as a state to clamp down on extremist thought. We haven't been able to take the bull by the horns, and the state's capacity to mete out punishments for violent acts by extremist entities is also lacking. You have seen the example of TLP, which came and it blocked an expressway for 7 days, and the government could only talk and appease them. And what happened after that? The appeasement encouraged them, and they started accusing the top judge of the country. So this is what is the problem, and the solution lies in a very strong hand on the till, zero tolerance for extremism, wresting back the control of madrasas and mosques from these extremists, and encouraging pluralism, accommodation, intersectarian harmony, interfaith harmony, and the state should be seen as the final arbiter of religious, thought. So no sectarian entity should be allowed to be the arbiter of a peculiar kind of ideology in whose name they can come out and start killing people.
Right, absolutely understand. Thank you very much, Brigadier Janjua, for joining us and being a part of the discussion today. We're now going to be taking a look at the next segment, which takes a look after, of course, what has happened in the aftermath of the assassination of the former Palestinian Prime Minister and Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh, something, of course, for which Pakistan observed a day of mourning, and then also with reference to the National Assembly's resolution that condemned this killing and talked about, very importantly, this as an effort to create a conspiracy and sabotage what is, of course, happening in Gaza. And Faisal, I'd like your take on that first. We've, of course, discussed a similar perspective that has been reiterated by the National Assembly today, of course. But what is important then, of course, is the impact that it does create and whether or not it will actually lead to a diversion and possibly an escalation.
Yeah, Sana, obviously this does create an impact, and of course when we talk about Pakistan, a country of 250 million, its parliament passes this resolution and of course stands with the people of Gaza, stands with the someone who was there to of course negotiate peace, but he was killed by Israel in Iran, and this is like sabotaging the peace process, and peace process which was being desired by not only Gaza itself, but all Palestine and the Middle Eastern countries as well. And Muslims all over the world, they have been of course seeking this peace resolve to whatever the menace is taking place in Gaza. And just wanted to highlight that Pakistan was one of the first countries that actually stood with Gaza when it started, and of course Ambassador Munir Akram, his speech actually created the momentum, and then rest of all of the Muslim countries, they started following that line, and I think that's how it should have been. Pakistan took the lead, Munir Akram took the lead, and now we know that Pakistan in this context as well has taken a lead, and rest of the Muslim countries are doing the same. And in this, why it is so important, when the parliaments all over the world, when they condemn this act, then of course it creates a sort of impact on United Nations itself, and United Nations, we know that they have been seeking peace resolve as well, and when they have been seeking peace resolve, that means that this should be condemned by in all its manifestations. And to me, I think it would create an impact, and the kind of gesture Pakistan has put forward, Pakistan once again has stood with people of Palestine, stood with people of Gaza, and reiterated that Pakistan would stand with Palestine when it comes to, of course, two-state solution and pre-1967 war borders, which Pakistan has always endorsed, that this is the position that Israel needs to go back to, and Pakistan will always be standing there.
Right, absolutely, and that is of course important, but we've also seen, Farrukh, in the aftermath, of course, this assassination, there has also been this aspect of a possibility of an escalation. At the same time, what Pakistan has reiterated of sabotaging the peace process is important, but will the US be able to actually take that forward again, and will be able to actually have that sort of influence in terms of making sure that it happens despite these attacks that have happened in Lebanon and Iran?
Right, Sana. I think that first of all, you have to appreciate the fact that if the U.S. president is saying that Haniyeh's assassination is not going to help the peace process, what kind of dire situation we are in, and why would Netanyahu actually take out somebody who actually was considered a moderate when it came to, remember, Hamas has two sides of the coin. On one side, you have a political voice. Haniyeh actually represented that. On the other side is the Sinwar, right, who's the head of the militant side. So what you have done is you have actually practically taken out the person who could have or who was actually part of negotiations.
True.
So now who gets empowered? The militant side, right? Why? Because a corrupt politician in Israel is so mortally afraid of going behind the bars that he has actually gamed the system and taken over, held the entire country of Israel hostage to hatred and malice. And because of that, and given that there wasn't that much space to do a lot in Gaza now, he had to actually expand the fight and take it to other countries. So, as I pointed out yesterday, if it is the worst case scenario for somehow word Hitler came to my mind, but Netanyahu, Bibi Netanyahu, if it is the worst case scenario, it becomes a fight between Lebanon and Israel. And if it is a good scenario for him, it becomes a global fight against Iran. So with that kind of a state of affairs, what will happen is that he will continue indefinitely, and he will keep on mocking his own constitution, his own Supreme Court, his own legislature, and his own political system just to stay in power. And that is what I kept on saying, that if these two people, and one was mentioned in our neighborhood, the other was, one is Netanyahu. I said that if they are there till November, and there are no signs that they won't be, there's a serious possibility of they causing actually a civil war in America also. Yeah. Why? Because America calls itself custodian of the international order. So it becomes a moral inconvenience. If it is engaged within, then you can get away with anything else. And you have seen what happened to President Biden. He was forced by their own media to drop out of the race because these two gentlemen did not like him. So with that kind of a situation, you have to realize that these people would stop at nothing to stay in power, even if it means a nuclear global war.
Right, and that is, of course, indeed unfortunate and very, very worrisome, and we hope that it doesn't come to that. But thank you very much, Farrukh, and thank you, Faisal, for joining us in the debate, as always. That's all that we have time for. We'll now see you Monday. Have a nice weekend.